In the end, it was when I was, say, 2 or 3 bodies under the floorboards began to accumulate that come summer, it got hot, and I knew it would be a smell problem. Yes. But I thought, well, I'm going to have to deal with the smell problem. And I thought, what would cause the smell more than anything else? And I came to the conclusion it was the innards, the soft parts of the body, the organs and stuff like that. So on a weekend, I would sort of pull up the floorboards, and I found it totally unpleasant and get blinding drunk, so I could face it, and start dissection on the kitchen floor.
Ha 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 ha. Hello, Phantom Fam. I'm Nat, and joining me as always is my best friend Katie.
Yeah.
And you are listening to Wading into the Void. I have a very dark episode for everyone today. And I'm wondering if anyone already knows who we're covering based off of the intro that I will be putting in post-recording. I just recently learned about this person, and although I kind of heard about, you know, how they got caught and everything kind of in passing once a while ago, it didn't really stick, and I didn't remember their name. So once I started doing research, I was like, oh, I remember this.
We love a moment like that.
Yeah. And I actually saw it I got Katie Christmas present / birthday present that I still haven't given her, and one of them I still haven't even made yet, to be completely honest. And, I looked in one of them, because it's like a thing that's like a book or a calendar or some kind of papers with information.
Hints.
And and I saw this in here without having looked at their name. And then,
so it's true crime related.
Yes.
It's like Guess Who, but like for Christmas presents.
You're gonna love it. And
I'm
you're
so
probably gonna use it for future episodes. I'll tell you that right now.
I will give you one hint and say you're gonna love yours and you're just gonna use it.
Yay!
I don't even know. We had a discussion about it. I don't think you remember.
No.
You totally don't. So this is gonna make it great.
Okay, cool.
You're gonna be a happy little lady.
Down a little bit. Alright. So yeah, let's get into tarot and then let's dive into it, because writing this made me like super uncomfortable and very disturbed, and mayhaps I did a little bit of writing at work in public and it was very uncomfortable, but I did it, okay?
And it was very uncomfortable.
Yeah, but it happened, you know, whatever. So,
we're here for
let's go into our oracle. We're doing the Mausolea Oracle of Souls. The text is by Rabbit Stoddard, with additional writing by Jason Angle, and it's illustrated by Jason Angle. And today we got the Martyr, which is very interesting.
I love
they
that.
are the matron of the blind.
Well.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they represent honesty, shame, and restitution. Interesting. So, in Mausolea, the affliction of blindness represents a blindness of the soul. Mortals who in life believe themselves extremely keen-sighted may find themselves so stricken upon their death if they live their lives in ignorance and delusion, their actions untampered by pity and compassion. Don't know, that sentence is really confusing.
It means you're heartless.
Okay. It is the task of the martyr to care for these souls, to guide them to reflection upon their sins, shame at their previous selves, and restitution through thoughtful service and care for others. Once such a soul can see their own faults, weaknesses, and the effects of one's actions on others clearly, and truly atone for them, only then can this blindness be cured. The martyr invites us to look clearly upon ourselves and our deeds and see the blindness in our souls so that we may not be eternally stricken.
That was a lot, but I kind of like it. That was a lot.
It was good. It's like, your actions have consequences, and if you don't realize you're being a shit person when you die, Miss Martyr is gonna make sure that you do realize.
Yeah, she's like, play no games.
Yes. So, now we're gonna move to our tarot, and I have, I guess, a little bit of a special treat for you that I unknowingly did. We're going to look at the Horror Tarot Deck and Guidebook by Aria Mitter and Minerva Siegel with illustrations by Abigail Larson.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow, I've shuffled this deck so many fucking times. This is the deck we used every single day for Halloween, 2 years in a row.
Yep.
And somehow, I pulled the Page of Cups and the Ace of Cups, which are right next to each other in the deck.
That's
in the book.
Unheard of. That's awesome.
And they're both upright as well.
Wow. Okay.
So the Page of Cups is like this little Jack-in-the-Box demon. He's just vibing. But the Page of Cups says, don't let circumstances get you wound up. In order to avoid an unpleasant surprise, listen to what people tell you. The Page of Cups has an important message that may result in a strong emotional reaction.
That's really interesting, considering you just got the Martyr that was talking about people having no fucking emotion.
Yeah, for sure. And now the Ace of Cups says the Ace of Cups represents emotional energy.
Okay.
And this could represent you're falling in love with someone new, and soon the relationship will enter the honeymoon stage, or some type of fertility, pregnancy, and a time of clearing out negative energy and emotional rebirth. So this has a bunch of different meanings, but look at where we're at right now. We are at the beginning of 2024. The beginning of a year is all about rebirth. You have all these people setting their New Year's resolutions, making changes, trying to make their life different and be reborn in some type of way. So I feel like this card's very fitting. And the other card is way fitting with the Mausolea card. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I like that a lot.
So that's what I have for today. You guys got 2 tarot cards. So,
how does it feel to be special the first episode of the year?
Oh, yeah, that makes it even more special.
It does.
All right. Our story today starts with a complaint in early February of 1983.
Okay.
Hello, Dino Rod Drain Specialist. How can we help you today? Yes, our toilets and showers aren't draining properly, and we think it might be clogged somewhere. Can you take a look in the manhole outside the apartment building for any blockages in the sewer? Upon descending into the manhole surrounded by all the tenants of the building, the Dino Rod technician discovered what appeared to be rotting human remains. They decided to conduct a full-scale inspection the next day to determine exactly what it was and the extent of the blockage. The plan was to contact the police after that with their findings. By the morning, however, the human remains were gone. Someone had gone and very suspiciously removed them. In fact, a downstairs tenant happened to catch who did it.
Dun, dun, dun.
To their surprise, it was their upstairs tenant, Dennis, quote-unquote, Des, Nilsen.
Okay.
So an investigation began to figure out what exactly was going on. On February 9th, 1983, Dennis Nilsen, quote-unquote, joked with a coworker, saying, "If I'm not in tomorrow, I'll either be ill, dead, or in jail." And he certainly wasn't wrong in his statement.
Love it.
In the evening of February 9th, Detective Chief Inspector Peter J. arrived at Dennis's apartment requesting to question him about the human remains that were found. Nilsen let him in, and as soon as he entered, he noticed that the apartment absolutely reeked. It was like the most disgusting foul odor, which basically pointed immediately to something sinister. It was the smell of rotten flesh. Dennis proclaimed that the cause of the odor was located in bags throughout the apartment. He didn't specifically say what it was at this point, but during a search of Nilsen's apartment, 2 dismembered heads and other various body parts were found rotting in bags. Thus began the investigation of Dennis Nilsen, a.k.a. the Kindly Killer, and also the Muswell Hill Murderer. And honestly, I'm low-key mad at his stupid-ass serial killer name because Dennis Nilsen ain't shit, and he had some kind of weird complex to try to mentally, like, not really justify, but, like, outweigh his bad acts with good acts. Like, you'll see when I explain. But he was literally so weird. He was weird as fuck. And I'm warning you all now that this episode is going to be really, really disturbing.
Great.
Like, full trigger warning. Trigger warning, trigger warning, trigger warning.
Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year.
We're starting it off with trauma.
There's going to be necrophilia, sexual assault, pedophilia, and other mature and disturbing themes. So, fair warning! 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 If you don't like any of that, or are not interested in hearing about anything even related to those topics, do not continue!
And if you do continue and then proceed to bitch at us, guess what?
That's your fault.
Fucking care.
That's your fucking fault, bitch. Okay?
But honestly, those names are fucking pathetic. That's up there with how terrible BTK is. Okay?
Bruh, yes. Seriously, literally. The Kindly Killer is the dumbest shit I've ever heard. And the fact that they gave him this name because of some of the things he says is the dumbest shit I've ever heard.
It makes no fucking sense.
A killer is a killer, and there is nothing kind about anything that he did. I'm saying that first and foremost before we even get into it, okay?
Yes. Agreed. Continue.
In order to get into the why of the actions that Dennis Nilsen committed, it's integral that we look back at how he grew up. So, as a child, Nilsen had been described as quiet but adventurous, and a lot of his earliest memories were picnics in the Scottish countryside and long walks with his grandfather. Oh. He was incredibly close with his grandfather.
But that's not a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing, but I do question his grandfather a little bit, just because of something we'll talk about in the next few minutes.
Gotcha, okay.
But he described his grandfather as a great hero and protector, and said that life would be empty until he returned from working as a fisherman at sea. But in 1951, Nilsen's grandfather's health began to decline rapidly, and he continued working because he was just like that, I guess. And on the 31st, he was built different, or so he thought, because on October 31st of 1951, he had a heart attack at sea.
Jesus.
And he died at the age of 62.
When was this again? Sorry?
51.
Okay. I was going to say, well, he lived a long time, but then I was like, this is somewhat recent, so no, he really didn't.
No. He didn't have really any bearing on Nilsen's life.
He didn't even reach retirement age.
Yeah, that's true. Well,
that fucking
this is like the 50s. I don't know. But
when did people retire in the 50s?
Did they retire in the 50s?
I'm looking it up. Hold on. Trends in retirement age by sex, 1950 to 2005.
Okay.
That's a large span, but we'll take it.
That is a very large margin.
The average age for men was 68.7.
Holy fuck. I'd kill myself at that point. Jesus.
Oh, here we go. The average lifespan after retirement for men in the 50s was 8 years. I would just fucking kill myself. Just saying.
Yeah, basically. Anyways, so he died. His body was returned home.
I'm sorry, it's just so blunt. So, yeah, he died.
This is integral to the story!
I know, I'm sorry.
His body was returned home, and they had an open casket viewing before his burial, and Nilsen's mother, Elizabeth, reportedly asked him if he'd like to see his grandfather. But
that's always how it starts.
Big note here, she didn't tell him that he died.
Oh. That, I see where that could be a problem. That's fucking terrible.
Nilsen was told after seeing his grandfather's dead body that he was sleeping and had quote-unquote gone to a better place. So this is instilling a very strange ideal in a child's head at such a young age. It's like a dead person sleeping that's peaceful, gone to a better place, but this is the person he is closest to and had no clue what death meant and didn't know he even died. Yeah. So that's pretty fucked up to experience as a child.
That's a big fuck you from the mom right there a little bit. Not gonna lie.
A little bit, yeah. It's pretty fucked up. So, over the following years, Nilsen began to withdraw from the world and become quieter than ever before. And he would supposedly stand alone at the harbor, watching all the boats come in. Basically, that's all he did. And then at home, he rarely participated in any family activities. So he was withdrawn even from his family. And eventually, Nilsen grew pretty envious of his older brother and became to resent the attention that he had gotten from their mother, grandmother, and eventually their stepfather when his mom remarried. And, Nilsen grew really close with his youngest sister, his younger sister. I don't know how many siblings he had. And he was often spending time playing and talking to her, almost as much as he had done with his grandfather. So he got pretty close to her. This is like one of his favorite people now. And
is this a bad thing?
Kind of, yeah.
I sense the trend. Okay.
During the onset of puberty, Nilsen discovered that he was gay.
Oh.
And reportedly, he was very confused and ashamed because of it. Because during that time, people were not openly gay and definitely not openly accepted.
Yeah, no.
And he hid his sexuality from his family and the very few friends that he had. And he assumed that his attraction to boys was actually an extension of the care that he had for his younger sister, Sylvia.
So I don't understand how that works, but
I don't know either.
Did she look? How old was she? Did she resemble a boy? When kids, if their hair's short, it's kind of hard to tell sometimes.
Perhaps. They were young. But to test his theory, Nilsen, on one occasion, sexually assaulted Sylvia by groping her. So, he has a weird mentality, because this is supposed to be someone he's as close to as his grandfather, and he's sexually assaulting them.
Yeah.
So, that kind of gives warning bells very quickly. Oh, go ahead.
I feel like, he doesn't really have a concept of right and wrong. And maybe this is judging based off of parenting, just from the one thing you said, which is probably a wrong thing to do. But, like, it didn't really seem like the honesty factor was big in the household at the time. So...
yeah, I don't really know. I didn't look into anything about his mom, because I didn't care about her. I didn't think she was very important because he was so close with his grandfather and he wasn't close with his family at all.
Fair enough.
So, but another confirming factor to, like, how he realized he was gay, according to him, was when an older boy had groped him. And he said that he, quote-unquote, didn't find the experience unpleasant.
Oh, okay.
So he was sexually assaulted, but he enjoyed it.
Which is a problem in and of itself, but... Actually,
keep that in mind.
Okay.
Because you will see this later on, that this kind of festers a little bit.
Great.
But on top of that, Nilsen also sexually assaulted his older brother, Olaf Jr., while he slept, which led his brother to begin to believe he was gay, and Nilsen started to belittle him out in public. So he wasn't open about his sexuality, but when his brother, who he assaulted, questioned his sexuality, Nilsen was shaming him in public and mocking him and making him feel horrible about it. And if that's projecting to its core, like, I don't know what else would be.
I was just gonna say that. Seems like somebody's projecting a little bit here.
Yeah. And so, when Nilsen was 14 years old, he actually joined the Army Cadet Force. So, all of this had happened before he was 14. So, he is very young, understanding what sexuality, intercourse, like groping, that kind of stuff is.
Gotcha.
And his goal was to join the British Army as a potential avenue to escape the environment of being in a small town. And 3 weeks before he enlisted, he had worked at a canning factory, which was incredibly dull and boring. And he was like, yeah, I want to become an army chef. So that's what he did. So we already have this kid who is repressing his sexuality and doing horrible things to the people around him who are supposed to be the people he's closest with. And he's using that as an attempt to understand himself. Like, the whole thing was, maybe I like boys because of my sister. Maybe I like boys because of this. Let me test it on these people. Like, he doesn't understand himself. He doesn't understand his sexuality, which is, I guess, maybe everybody goes through that. But it's weird to take it out on other people.
Yeah, I mean...
without their consent.
It seems like a fairly normal thing for one to... I mean, I have personally never, but in this situation, it seems like it's very normal for someone to question their sexuality, especially during the 50s, you know, when it's not a social norm type thing. And plenty of people have done it, millions of people have done it, and they haven't assaulted their siblings and family members, so...
Yes. Big shocker! This is not how you go about trying to understand yourself and your sexuality. Clearly, this child is completely withdrawn from normal human interaction and unable to go about this revelation in a positive way. Like I said, this is all before he's the age of 14, and we're already seeing the forceful nature of Dennis.
That didn't connect. That he wasn't even, 15.
Yeah.
That didn't connect in my head, so I'm disturbed. It's
really interesting that the assault from the older boy seemed to happen after he had already sexually assaulted his sister. So, in my opinion, I was like, how does he know or understand what these things are, if not for maybe his grandfather was a little too close to him?
No.
I didn't see anything like that because, of course, this was his, person that he put on a pedestal. This was his hero. And I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
So, and also, in the future, it seems like he has this really weird relationship. He goes after young men or, teenage boys. So he's looking for this weird younger boy, older man relationship. So, yeah, I don't know. It's weird. In the mid-1964 era, Nilsen had passed his initial catering exam and was assigned to a post in West Germany, and he served as a private there. And during deployment, he had begun to drink a lot of alcohol. Like, him and his colleagues, his mates or whatever, they were all drinking heavily all the time, it seemed like.
Okay.
And there's one story of note where Nilsen and a young German man, it says German youth. I don't know how young youth is, but they drank themselves completely, like, blackout drunk. And they stayed at the German man's apartment. And Nilsen woke up on the floor. He claimed nothing happened between them, but he claimed that this event fueled the start of his dark sexual fantasies. The fantasies, which included a young, slender male being entirely passive, unconscious, or dead. So, yeah. This is normal.
I don't have words.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Afterwards, Nilsen began making efforts to have his body be sexually abused by his colleagues, and he would drink with them and pretend to be unconscious, hoping that they would assault him.
There's so much wrong with this man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In 1967, Nilsen was deployed to the state of Aden, which is now a part of Yemen, I guess. But he served as a cook at another post. This post was incredibly dangerous, even more dangerous than any place he had ever been before. And at that point, he claimed that he had been kidnapped by an Arab taxi driver who beat him unconscious and put him in the trunk of his car. He was apparently awake when the driver dragged him out of the trunk, and Nilsen attacked him with a jack handle and beat him unconscious. And then he locked the man in the trunk of his taxi before escaping. So, I don't know. But that apparently also fueled his dark sexual fantasies even more. According to him, of course. All of this is according to him. But at that posting, he had a private room for the first time where he would apparently masturbate without discovery, allowing his dark fantasies to grow even further. So here's where we start to see the, like, really fucked up shit that he's thinking about. So, at this point, every time he masturbates, he is thinking of having sex with an unresistant or deceased partner while watching himself in the mirror. So, this is really weird and fucked up.
Charming. Okay.
Yes.
That should go on a dating profile. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That should go on his Grindr account, you know? Just right on there.
Yeah, his Grindr account.
Yeah.
So he had discovered that by using a freestand mirror that wasn't showing his head, he could, quote unquote, split his personality to live out these fantasies, envisioning himself as both the dominant and submissive partner. I don't even know what that means, and I don't want to try to figure it out. So we're just going to move on.
I don't think that's how that works.
Sure. He's fucking crazy. He's fucking weird. So, like I said before, he claimed that after having that kidnapping experience, the fantasies became more and more extreme, and also witnessing a bunch of dead bodies while in Aden, and the, imagery of the 19th century oil painting entitled The Raft of Medusa. All of these things apparently fueled his sexual fantasies, which now I have to see this painting because I didn't look it up.
But I hate that. the Wrath of Medusa, someone who was a victim of assault.
Raft.
Oh.
Like a boat.
Oh, okay. I thought you said wrath, and I'm like,
This
what?
fucking painting, there's nothing sexy about it. There's one tiny penis that you can see, and that's literally it.
There's absolutely nothing appealing about this.
No. Like,
I mean,
you
other
can't
than
even
the fact
see
that they're
anything.
supposed to be dead.
I guess.
But make
But you
it clear,
can't
that's
even
not
really
appealing
tell.
to me.
You can't even tell that they're dead. It's just like people.
Yeah, no. This
And this
man's
guy's
just
stupid.
strange.
This guy's dumb. But one of his most vivid fantasies actually involved washing a dead man's body in a bathtub. And it was actually something that he would live out with most of his murders, which is very unfortunate that he actually got to live out these fantasies. And it makes me really mad, actually. But,
I hate him.
So he finally returned to UK, and he was then transferred to Cyprus in 1969, whatever. Like, he's all over the place. And he only had a few months before being transferred again to Germany. And there, he would finally have his first sexual encounter, not with a man, but with a woman. And Nilsen had apparently hired a prostitute and bragged about the encounter to his army buddies, despite him later describing the experience as overrated and depressing. So that's great. You know what? He didn't deserve it anyways.
No, he didn't.
And there's no reason why he should have even done it in the first place. He knew he was gay this whole time. Like, why? But whatever. So between October and December 1972, Nilsen lived with his family while he was trying to figure out what he wanted to do with his life. And at this point, his, like, army stuff was basically over. And his mother would constantly voice her opinions about being more concerned over his lack of female companionship than anything revolving around his career. She wanted to see him get married and start a family, but that was clearly not something he was interested in at all.
Read the room, honey.
Read the room. He don't like ladies. He don't want to get married. That's not happening, but whatever. So the final straw that finally pushed him to leave his family completely was when he went on an outing with his older brother and his sister-in-law and another couple to watch a documentary about gay men. And all of them, besides Nilsen, mocked the topic, while Dennis was trying to defend gay rights. And they all started fighting. And the two brothers obviously started, like, physically fighting. And it led
Sounds like
to
a good time.
Olaf Jr. informing their mother that Nilsen was gay. And Nilsen never spoke to his brother again and maintained a very sporadic written relationship with the rest of his family. So he really had no contact with his family after that moment.
Was this the one he assaulted?
Yes.
Is it wrong? Like,
No.
I was gonna say, good for him.
It. Yeah.
Considering he publicly mocked him.
In 99.9% of cases of people outing other people, that is the wrong thing to do. But this was
That's why I hesitated.
victim. This was a victim who was assaulted by their sibling, finally saying something to someone. So I don't know. But
So I wasn't in the wrong for that opinion. Good to know.
I personally don't think so in this case, knowing the person that he is. But yeah, I don't know. It's a touchy topic. But in order to escape his family, Nilsen joined the Metropolitan Police Force and moved to London in December to begin training. By April 1973, he had finished his training and he was posted to Willesden Green. And this is where he discovered a fascination with morgue visits and autopsied bodies.
Great.
Yes. However, despite the obvious advantages to being a police officer and having access to a morgue and all that shit, in December 1973, he actually resigned, because he was in a relationship with someone and they broke up and he had a pity party, basicly.
Okay. Fair. That's a rational decision.
Yeah, exactly. So after a brief stint working as a security guard, he found himself working as a civil servant at a job center on Denmark Street in May 1974. And his coworkers kind of knew that he was pretty quiet and conscientious and was active in the trade union movement. And he frequently volunteered to work overtime, so a lot of his coworkers basically thought he was a loner and believed him to be a loner. Mm-hmm. So in June 1982, Nilsen was transferred to a job center in Kentish Town, and this is where he would act as an executive officer with additional supervisory responsibilities. But this is the job he was working up until his arrest in 1983. So now let's take a look at his crimes. And they spanned really for like 10 years. Okay, 1973 to 1983.
Okay, so that's a decent amount of time.
And there were apparently 12 victims, by the way.
Okay.
I don't know if all of them were murdered or if they were attempted murder and the murders.
Okay.
I might say it at the end. Okay. But there is an additional victim that I will add that most people don't, but I'm going to add because it makes me sad.
All right. I'm cool with that.
Nilsen's first official brush with the police came in 1973. David Painter was a young man who Nilsen had met through his work, and he had claimed that Nilsen had taken pictures of him while he was asleep.
Weird, okay.
Painter was apparently so incredibly angry that he required hospitalization as a result of their confrontation. So this man was incredibly angry that Nilsen was taking pictures of him while he was asleep.
I mean, it's fair.
It's creepy. It's creepy. And knowing
it's
his
fine
sexual
when Edward
fantasies,
Cullen does it, but not him.
And it's not okay when anyone does it, to be honest.
It's fiction.
This
the
is
original
not,
dark romance.
But Nilsen was brought in for questioning about the incident, but he was released without charge. So nothing happened to David Painter, but he's doing sketchy shit. So in 1975, he was living with a man named David Galishon in a garden apartment situated at 195 Melrose Avenue in North London. Galishon pretty much vehemently denied that they had any type of sexual or romantic relationship. But they lived together for 2 years. And after he left, Nilsen's life began like a downward spiral into severe alcoholism and severe loneliness.
I mean, I would pretend like I didn't have a relationship with him either.
Yeah. Yeah, because they likely would have asked him, like, once people knew he was a murderer.
Yeah. I'd be like, no, didn't know him.
Because, one, you'd be outing yourself, and two, you would have had relations with a necrophilic murderer.
Yeah, I would.
So,
no.
It's gross. But this guy leaving was basically what snowballed Dennis into committing his first murder, which happened to be 18 months later. So Nilsen became increasingly disturbed by his sexual encounters that have happened throughout his life. And the most recent ones during this time kind of only seemed to reinforce his loneliness when they were over. It seemed like he was having probably a lot of one-night stands or whatever. And this is when he met his first young victim in a pub on December 29th, 1978. He invited him home, as he had on previous occasions. I don't believe this is the same person that he had been meeting. I think this was the first time that the guy came over. But, regardless, the next morning, overcome by desire to prevent him from leaving, Dennis did the most intelligent thing that anyone could do and strangled him with a tie before drowning him in a bucket of water.
That's a terrible way to go. I am so sorry. That's terrible.
So
a bucket of water.
Yeah.
After being asphyxiated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that seemed to be his thing. I don't understand where it came from. Like, his whole thing is choking with a tie, choking with his hands. Oh, we go to water now? We drown in water. Ooh, I give you bath? That's what happens next. Like, it's weird.
Could the water thing kind of be like a nod to his grandfather?
I'm wondering if his grandfather gave him baths or something.
I'm thinking the drowning specifically, since his grandfather died at sea. How much information did his mother give him?
There was another story that I didn't include because I didn't think it was important, but it must be important here. Because he did, actually, while he was at the beach or the ocean somewhere, he actually was drowning, and a young boy had saved him from the water.
Okay.
So maybe he's reenacting his own trauma in some way.
Could be.
But yes, I forgot to add that because I was like, I don't see how this goes, but it clearly is related somehow. But after he had killed this man, he took the corpse into his bathroom to wash it, and then he placed it back in his bed, later remarking that he found the corpse beautiful.
Ugh.
He attempted to have sex unsuccessfully with it, and then spent the night sleeping next to the dead man. He finally hid the corpse under his floorboards for 7 months before removing it and burning the decaying remains in the back of his garden.
Oh my... 7 months?
It must have stunk.
So bad.
So bad. God. Nilsen had another close call with the police in October 1979. A young student had accused him of trying to strangle him during a bondage play session. And despite that person's claims, no charges were ever pressed against Nilsen. So they've had multiple weird, creepy reports to the police, and the police seem to be doing nothing about it.
Hello, Jeffrey Dahmer.
Which is interesting because this case is very, very similar to Jeffrey Dahmer.
Interesting, okay.
Dennis Nilsen's actually dubbed, like, Britain's Jeffrey Dahmer. Even though he's Scottish, he lived in UK, whatever.
Interesting, okay.
But, yeah, we'll go through it, and it's kind of the same list of things that they do. Similar. And similar sexual fantasies, too. But Nilsen encountered his second victim, Canadian tourist Kenneth Ockendon, at a pub on December 3rd, 1979, following a day of sightseeing and drinking, which ended at Nilsen's apartment. Nilsen, again, succumbed to his fears of abandonment, apparently, according to him, and strangled Ockenden to death with an electrical cable. He cleaned up the corpse, as he did before, and shared the bed with it overnight. He took photos, engaged in sex, and finally deposited the corpse under the floorboards, removing it frequently and engaging in conversation as if Ockenden were still alive. So...
Great. So he's actually fucking nuts.
Yeah. He's talking to it. Like, this person is a severely lonely person, and they will do anything in order to not feel that loneliness. Clearly. So, his third victim, which happened 5 months after this, was Martin Duffy, a homeless 16-year-old. And this is where the pedophilia comes in. This guy, let's see, at this point, he's like probably in his 30s. Because if his grandfather died in 51, he was still a kid. This is almost the 80s, so he's getting around that age. And this kid is 16 years old. This is fucked up. So he invited this homeless 16-year-old Martin Duffy to spend the night with him on May 13th, 1980. And as the same as his first victim, this poor kid was strangled and then drowned before Nilsen decided to bring him back to the bed and masturbated over the teenager's corpse.
No!
And then poor Duffy was kept in a wardrobe for 2 weeks before joining Ockenden under the floorboards.
He kept him in a fucking wardrobe?
Yeah. And at that point, I don't know if he was keeping him in there or if he was taking him out and talking to him like the other guy, or what he was doing, because that's really fucking weird. And this is like May, so it's not cold outside, so the bodies are probably like decomposing at a normal or somewhat fast rate because it's like late spring. So I don't know. It's gross. It's gross to think about. But his next victim was sex worker Billy Sutherland, who was 27, who had the misfortune of following Nilsen home one night. He was also strangled. Another one of his victims, 24-year-old Malcolm Barlow, was an orphan with learning disabilities.
You think it can't get any worse?
Yeah.
And it gets worse.
Yeah, it was like anyone that he could get his hands on to kill, he literally would.
Trying to figure out where, like, the kindness comes in.
Oh, we haven't even got there yet.
Awesome.
So, yes, unfortunately, Malcolm was also strangled to death. And by 1981, Nilsen had killed 12 men in the apartment.
Jesus.
Of whom only 4 could be identified.
No. Ugh.
Which is tragic. It's fucking sad. Because a lot of them are homeless people or sex workers in the 80s or 70s. It's sad. Since he's preying on homeless and unemployed people or sex workers in a large city, it was probably very easy for them to go unnoticed. Much like how Jeffrey Dahmer chose his victims. However, his victims were minorities, and people were just racist and didn't give a fuck about minorities because they were fucked up.
I mean,
but
at
this
least
is the same kind of thing.
That it's not just the United States. at this point.
No, it's everyone. It's everyone everywhere. Racism is still active everywhere, and it's disgusting, and it needs to stop. And I don't know how to fix it besides me saying this shit, because it's true. Stop being fuckheads. That's all I have to say about that.
That's Natalie's public service announcement for the day.
PSA, stop being a fuckhead. So, Nilsen claimed that he went into a killing trance in each of these times that he murdered these poor people.
Bullshit.
However, this is what he says. However, on 7 occasions, he actually freed the men rather than complete the act of murdering them because he was quote-unquote able to snap out of it. Like, what the fuck are you talking about?
How good of him. So they just get to live with the trauma
Literally,
instead.
It's so dumb. He's talked about, I've had these sexual fantasies since I was a teenager, basically. And I went into an act of rage. I went into a killing trance. Like, no, this is what you've wanted ever since you were a teenager, and you're going to do anything you can in order to achieve that sexual fantasy. You're not going into a blind anything. You're not going into a trance anything. You are actively murdering and doing the weird shit to these people. Not against your will. Oh no, this is exactly what you've wanted forever. So this is where he gets that term, the kindly killer.
No.
Because he freed 7 people instead of killing them.
How
Which is no.
kind.
This is him, in his mind, trying to make himself feel like a good person. Like,
Yeah.
oh, this is out of my control. I can't control what I'm doing it. But when I am in control, I choose to make them live instead of die. I'm a good person. No.
As if he still didn't fucking, like, assault them anyway. Like...
Exactly. And before he murdered people, he was assaulting other people. It's like, you're still not a good person. You're a shit human.
Yeah, he's a garbage human being, and I'm not here for it.
So, obviously, because he let 7 people go, there were a few witness testimonies from these victims, and they usually followed a similar format. They met at a bar, or somehow met up. They stayed and talked there until closing. Nilsen invited them to his apartment. They talked and drank, and he introduced them to Bleep, Nilsen's one and only friend, which was his dog.
That poor animal.
I know! Bleep was really cute, too. I looked up a picture of her. But then him and his victim would go to sleep together, and the victim would either wake up being physically assaulted by being strangled, or would wake up with a very sore throat, bloodshot eyes, and marks on their neck. And one of the victims had gone to the hospital to make sure that they, like, weren't sick or something, because they had no clue what had happened, and they ended up being diagnosed with literal strangulation. Imagine going to the doctors like, oh, I think I have COVID, my throat hurts so bad, and they're like, no, you were strangled. What? Like, what?
That's a wild fucking day, okay?
Yeah.
That's all I gotta say.
Like, being completely unaware that something so horrible happened to you.
That just makes me question, like, if it obviously wasn't enough force to, like, wake them up, how, like, slowly and long was he, like, fucking strangling them throughout the night?
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's so annoying for him to, like, play off him, like, releasing people, like, oh, I snapped out of it, blah, blah, I'm a good person, blah, blah, blah. And the majority of his victims, he just, like, straight up murdered because of these quote-unquote blackouts. Like, it was like, no, you killed 12 people. Releasing 7 people doesn't mitigate the 12 lives that you took.
The only blackout rage that I am allowing in this tale is the one guy he was taking fucking pictures of, and he blacked out so mad that he went to the hospital.
Yeah.
That's it.
Seriously. But throughout the entire time of his confessions, he basically said that he didn't remember anything he had done to actually kill him. But somehow he did, and somehow had a perfect explanation of what had happened, and in my opinion, he's foolish in the game that he was trying to play, trying to make it seem like he was mentally unfit in some way, like there's something physically wrong with him, like he's blacking out and this shit is happening. You know, he's trying to set something up for them to deem him, like, unfit for trial or something.
And that's what a lot of them do.
Least.
It's so stupid.
Yeah. Every single serial killer, basically, is like, I blacked out, I don't remember, something happened to me, I was possessed, it's like, they can't take responsibility for their own sick fucking desires, because they want to be let go so they can keep doing it. I'm getting heated. But
I can tell.
Going back to his victims, by the time Barlow was killed, the man with learning disabilities, the orphan, Nilsen had been forced to stuff him under the kitchen sink because he was rapidly running out of storage space. He had about a half dozen bodies hidden around the apartment.
That's a lot.
He was forced to spray his rooms twice a day to be rid of the flies that were hatching from the decomposing bodies. And when neighbors complained about the smell, he convinced them that they stemmed from structural problems within the building. If that even makes sense.
No.
Like, what?
I'm sorry to his neighbors, because I'm going to say something insulting. How fucking stupid do you have to be to believe that?
Right? Obviously, you should be able to tell, like, what rotting flesh smells like compared to, like, mold or something. It's stupid. But at this point, here's where we get to the part that is actually related to the intro and everything that made me realize what this case was.
Okay.
To get rid of the bodies, he would actually remove his clothing completely, drink heavily, and listen to Laurie Anderson's song, Oh Superman, on repeat. And that is the song that has blown up on TikTok and Instagram Reels. Well, you don't know me, but I know you. That is so fucked up. So, yeah, he would dismember them on the kitchen floor with a large kitchen knife, sometimes boiling the skulls to remove the flesh, also placing organs and other viscera in plastic bags for disposal, all while being completely naked, mind you. So, this is weird. This is really weird and gross. Like, the dismembering thing, that's like a common serial killer thing, whatever. Being naked and listening to this song, go listen to this song. It is, 8 minutes long, weird as shit, creepy, and very anxiety-inducing. So, the fact that he was obsessed...
how much I hate this man.
The fact that he was obsessed with this song was just so strange. Like, that was his dismemberment song. He would listen to it on repeat. And, like, I watched the music video and listened to the song a few times, like 3 times in a row, to try to envision what the scene would look like, you know? And it was really disturbing. It made me feel gross, and, but it made me really think a lot. And I found myself kind of engrossed in this case, because it's like, this person is clearly mentally unstable in some way, but they know exactly what they're doing. There is no, I blacked out, I can't remember doing this. This person is literally dismembering people because he's trying to get rid of them. He is completely aware of what he's doing. He has no shame about it whatsoever. At this point, he has not said anything about being remorseful, and it's gross. So,
Preach.
Huh?
Preach.
So, after the bodies had been dismembered, Nilsen buried limbs in the garden and in the shed, and stuffed torsos into suitcases until he could burn the remains in a bonfire at the edge of his garden. And on occasions, he would burn fires all day long without raising any suspicion from his neighbors.
Yeah, and nothing's wrong with this picture.
Right. He generally crushed the bones once the fire had eaten all the flesh away. Because he was trying to get rid of bone fragments, but the police ended up finding thousands of bone fragments in the garden later during forensic examinations. So clearly he wasn't doing it well enough. But in 1982, in a quote-unquote desperate attempt to stifle his homicidal behavior, Nilsen ended up moving into a top-floor apartment at 23 Cranley Gardens and Muswell Hill, which was also in North London, but it had no garden, no convenient floorboards that he could hide bodies under. Like, this place, he chose specifically, like, I don't want to murder anymore. I gotta take away these advantages so I don't feel tempted. So he literally is actively aware that he is murdering. Clearly. But still unable to quell his impulses. A further 3 victims were killed in this apartment between his arrival and February 1983. And these victims were identified as John Howlett, Archibald Graham Allen, and Stephen Sinclair. And Nilsen faced a huge challenge with this disposal of these bodies. There was no direct access to outdoor space, and he decided, I'm going to boil the heads, feet, and hands and dissect the bodies into tiny, tiny little pieces to flush down the toilet and dispose of in plastic bags.
It's like if Jeffrey Dahmer and the soap lady had a kid. I hate it.
Mm-hmm. And so this is where we kind of find ourselves at the point where Dinah Rod was called in to fix the drain blockage. So upon his arrest, Dennis Nilsen immediately provided exhaustive details about his killing spree. And he admitted to killing 15 young men. And he also admitted to the attempted murder of the 7 other people. Although he could really only name 4 of them, which is fine, whatever. But at no point he showed any remorse. And he actually appeared eager to assist the police with gathering evidence against him, which was really weird. He took them to his old address to point out specific disposal details, like about the garden and stuff.
Well, that's why. He wanted to relive it one last fucking time.
Exactly. He's such a narcissist. In some way, shape, or form, he is 100% a narcissist. It's gross. But after the confession, Nilsen was held at Brixton Prison while he was awaiting his trial. And while he was there, he wrote over 50 notebooks of his memories to assist the prosecution. And also
I thought he couldn't remember anything.
Mm-hmm. He also drew what he referred to as quote-unquote sad sketches, where he detailed his treatment of some of his victims. And he seemed like completely accepting of his fate. He was like, yep, I deserve this. And then he was like also concerned about the public's attitude towards him, because like he fired his legal counsel, rehired him, fired him shortly once again, like right before the trial started. Like he was like, he wanted people to think of him in some way, but I don't know what way he wanted them to think of him. I don't even know.
As an asshole? Like,
I don't know. So his trial commenced on October 24th, 1983, and Nilsen was charged with 6 counts of murder and 2 charges of attempted murder. And most of this was because they either didn't have, witness testimony, or they couldn't identify the people that he had murdered. So he pleaded not guilty to all charges and cited diminished responsibility due to mental defect.
Dickhead.
So this is what he's been trying to build up to this whole time, where none of the things that he has done could even remotely, assume that. It's actually so stupid that he tried this. But the prosecution relied primarily on the extensive interview notes that resulted from his arrest, which took over 4 hours to read verbatim to the jury, as well as the testimony of the 3 victims, Paul Nobbs, Douglas Stewart, and Carl Stoddard, who had managed to escape, and all of whom he had attempted to strangle. So they literally had 4 hours worth of notes from when they took him into the police station.
He's clearly so full of himself, he couldn't shut up.
Despite attempts of Nilsen's defense to undermine the testimony of these victims by introducing evidence of their sexual encounters with Nilsen, obviously, people were like, no, this literally, basically, according to, since all the victims were like, yeah, he's fucked up, he tried to kill us, even though they had sexual relations, people were like, no, you're fucked up, that's fucked up. That person obviously wasn't consenting to being strangled to death. Which, honestly, good on them in the 80s for saying that. Especially for people who are gay. The physical evidence included photographs of the murder scenes, as well as the chopping board that was used to dissect the victims, and the cooking pot used to boil the skulls, feet, and hands, which apparently is now on display at the Black Museum at Scotland Yard, which, now that I've learned of this, we should go, now that I know what Scotland Yard is.
Oh my gosh.
So the defense case relied primarily on the testimony of 2 psychiatrists, which, that's so dumb, first of all. But the psychiatrists are Dr. James McKeith and Dr. Patrick Galloway. And McKeith described Nilsen's troubled childhood, inability to express feelings, and resulting separation of mental function from physical behavior, which affected his own sense of identity and implied an impaired responsibility on the part of Nilsen. Under intense cross-examination by the prosecution, however, McKeith was forced to retract his judgment about diminished responsibility. So they tore into this guy.
Good!
They tore into him. They were like, how did you even come to this conclusion? And he's like, just kidding. He tried!
He was like, so...
bitch, you thought?
I lied, but... I didn't know you couldn't do that in a court of law. Oh my god.
Yeah, this is great. They completely tore into both of these guys because the second psychiatrist, Galloway, diagnosed Nilsen with false self syndrome, which is characterized by outbreaks of schizoid disturbances, which made him incapable of premeditation. But most of his testimony was extremely technical, even giving the judge cause to question Galloway's complex diagnosis. So it was like, well, technically, I guess he could be like this, I guess. Technically. Here's, Wikipedia most complex definition of what this means. So the prosecution called Dr. Paul Bowden as a rebuttal psychiatrist who had spent a considerable time with Nilsen. So This is somebody who has actually spent time learning about Nilsen and is aware of the case and everything that's happened, and this is what the prosecution uses to counteract what these two idiots said. He basically was like, there's literally no evidence of what you said. The defense psychiatrists are dumb and wrong. And he stated that Nilsen, yes, it was manipulative and had some signs of mental abnormality, but was still cognizant of and responsible for his actions. So basically, summing it up, the judge dispensed the majority of what the two psychiatrists said. That had perplexed the jury on purpose to basically confuse them into agreeing, and said, a mind can be evil without being abnormal. He said, This person's fucked up, and there's nothing that's causing him to be fucked up directly. Like, there's not some type of personality thing or anything like that. He's just messed up. So the jury finally retired on November 3rd, 1983, and they were unable to reach a unanimous verdict. But the following day, the judge agreed to accept a majority verdict, and at 4:25 p.m., they delivered a verdict of guilty on all 6 counts of murder. Woo! So the judge sentenced Dennis Nilsen to life in prison without the eligibility of parole for at least 25 years. And Nilsen ended up dying in prison in 2018.
I'm not saying it's good, but it's good.
Dennis Nilsen's horrible deeds were the result of his inability to make human connection, extreme sexual repression and humility, and long-time festering dark sexual fantasies. I don't know where they came from, but they just developed, and I don't know if his grandpa did something or what. But the only thing that Nilsen had actually seemed to care about throughout that entire time was his dog Bleep. And unfortunately, Bleep would be dubbed the last victim of Nilsen because she was put down several days after the murderer was sentenced to life because cops assumed that no one would want to adopt a serial killer's dog.
Well, they're wrong.
An incredibly sad thing, which Bleep didn't deserve at all. Nobody had to know that she was his dog. They could have renamed her or whatever. And they just decided to kill her when she wasn't involved at all.
Poor little baby. Oh my god.
It's just crazy. I don't know. So here we are. We've gone through the horrible acts that Dennis Nilsen committed. And this man was so sick. I think the combination of his grandfather dying, being super close to his grandfather as a young boy, various strange sexual acts throughout his life, and the sexual repression kind of like snowballed into this very disturbing thought process of seeing the dead bodies at peace and as beautiful, because there's quotes of him being like, after I killed the first guy, I had him sitting in a chair and he just looked so beautiful and so at peace. Like, I just loved it. And, like, that's so fucked up. And I really don't get how he jumped originally from wanting to be the one assaulted while he was unconscious to being the one assaulting the dead/unknowing bodies. But it's very interesting to look at someone who shares a lot of the same tastes to Jeffrey Dahmer. And I think Jeffrey Dahmer certainly had his own weird shit that he was into, like the whole cannibalism thing, obviously. But they basically looked for the same kind of sexual fantasies. A boy or a young man, easy to not miss because of them either being a minority or homeless or a sex worker. They wanted them to be unconscious or dead, completely submissive and unaware. And it's some kind of weird control thing as well as being able to express their sexuality without anyone actually knowing what they're doing, because the people they're doing the acts to are dead and are no longer aware of what they're doing. So I think a lot of it kind of comes back to that shame that they experienced for being gay. Obviously, repressing your sexuality doesn't mean you're going to become a violent or evil person. Those things are completely unrelated, usually. But the reason... Usually. Yeah, the reason or motive kind of relies on those types of feeling for these individuals, at least. But yeah, like, I think Jeffrey Dahmer at one point was, like, drilling into people's skulls to try to, like, basically paralyze them and make them completely, like, unable to move and stuff. And it's, like, kind of the same thing. Like, they wanted this basically lifeless body to do whatever they wanted with. And it was really fucked up. But they share similar tastes. Being literally halfway across the world is very interesting to see. But it doesn't really say anywhere that Dennis Nilsen was particularly bright in any way. I think Jeffrey Dahmer was pretty intelligent, but I don't know. He was really weird. Maybe we'll cover him at some point. But that's eventually. All I have. Yeah, eventually. But, Katie, do you have any thoughts?
I thoroughly did not enjoy myself. Which is a good thing, you know, it proves I'm a normal human. And, nonetheless, this was interesting to learn about, because before you had even mentioned the thing with the song and possibly wanting to cover him, I believe it was a week or two ago. I don't remember if you said it in the episode, but our New Year's wrap up. But yeah. I definitely did want to hear the story, and I'm glad we were able to touch on it. And I hope we never have to speak about him ever again.
Yeah, but I don't know. I like doing these, like, serial killer episodes, but I also like doing the ones that are not as prolific.
Yes.
I mean, this is probably incredibly prolific in the UK, but since we're in America, it's like... Yeah, whatever. There's even a TV show about this, just like the Dahmer one.
Oh.
Like, it's called Daz? D-E-S, Dez, sorry. Because he called himself Dez for some reason. I don't think anybody actually called him that except for him. Which...
That makes so much sense.
But David Tennant actually plays him, and he played Doctor Who. At some point. He was, like, the first Doctor Who that I watched.
Okay.
So, yeah, he's a great actor. So, I'm assuming the show is probably very interesting. Yeah. But, yeah, I just learned that it existed today, basically. So, yeah, that's all I have.
Well, thank you, dude, for covering it. Good job.
Yeah. I really liked the beginning of the phone call. That was fun writing.
Yeah, I liked that. That was good. So I guess if you want more content, follow us on social media. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Wading Into the Void. And if you feel so inclined, you can find us on Patreon by searching Wading Into the Void.
Yay!
And expect something spooky next time. Bye!